have my desktop Spotify, but I'm not sure.
Oh.
Do I need to have some permission to add it?
I thought that the link that I shared, I don't know, let's talk about this afterwards. Yeah, let's maybe we can experiment on it, because it would be cool if actually, everybody could just add to it. But I thought I was using the link the way that they suggested doing it, but maybe I did it wrong. Anyway, hey everybody, hey Marathon Mind, hey Jay Hiniart, hey Acid. Let's see, bring up the. Okay. Acid, did you see my note about talking about Twitter flows today?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So wait a little bit. I just got off an interesting call with somebody who's doing a PhD thesis on the TEC. Hey, Auntie. Yeah, so they've been working on this this thesis. They're going to be publishing this thesis, and TEC is like one of the featured case studies. And in fact, actually, a big chunk of it is on Sampo, which is weird. Yeah. Hey, Bear.
Hey, everyone.
So let's see. Okay, let's get going. I just thought we'd do just like a simple check-in today. Intentions and distractions. Marathon Mind, do you want to start?
Intentions. I just want to figure out how things are working here, and possibly look into how to contribute to TSC. And distractions. It's a bit cold here in Hartley, so that's a fair distraction. Yeah. Can I pass it on?
Yeah, please pick somebody to pass it on to. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll pass it on to Acid.
Thanks. My intentions are just to catch up with you guys to see the updates of the week. Distractions. I'm really tired because my neighbors had a party yesterday and I couldn't sleep very well, but no worries. I will sleep later. And I'll pass it to Bear.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, so intentions just to check up with everyone as well, see the updates, and start to get ourselves organized for the month of February in terms of projects, budgeting, different type of things. And for distractions, I'm a little hungry, but that'd be the only thing. I'll pass it to Joseph. Jay in New York.
So updates had a meeting with Nate with regards to some of the projects that he's got going on, and I'm going to be helping him out with regards to documentation and getting everything documented with regards to focus groups and other things like that. Distractions, no real distractions. It's hot outside, so I want to be at the beach, but I'm here. And and the intentions are just to keep on being present, learn more, and contribute as much as I can.
Awesome. Do you want to pass it on? I think Nate and Enti still need to go.
Yeah, I'll nominate Nate.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. So my intentions are to actually present the Shelling Point initiative to everybody to kind of just make sure that we kind of are all on the same page and that we're sharing the overall, what our plans are for the next month or so, so that we can all kind of be a little bit synergistic in terms of our efforts around the goals here in the TEC. And so I hope to give you a good insight on my vision for that. And then my distractions are currently none. I have an empty apartment this morning, which is really awesome. So I'll pass it over to Dante.
Thanks. Intentions, well, seems like we have quite a nice agenda for today. So looking forward to hearing everything. Distractions, I have a very slight headache. So that's it. Back to you, Gideon.
Thanks, Enti. My intentions, really, the projects and like getting some clarity on how we handle projects as a team. Like, how do we work through all this stuff? This is the first time, so getting clarity on that's my number one intention for today. Distractions. I'm just coming off this cold and did not sleep very well last night at all, so I'm a little bit tired. But other than that, actually surprisingly good to go. Why don't we start with just some quick updates? I'll kick it off with the conversations with the Token Engineering Academy are, in the collaboration there are moving nicely. We're like getting this plan for a plan, kind of breaking things up into kind of like different chunks of kind of functional areas. So that's moving pretty nicely. I've had some on the strategic plan, had some good feedback from people. Actually, it's been really encouraging. I met with Jeff Emmett yesterday and Jessica Zartler. I think that's how she says it. They had really good, very interesting feedback on the plan. They liked it. I mean, generally speaking, it's been very positive feedback on this framework. So I feel like at this point we're pretty much good to go. I think I'm going to start shifting next week into like getting a post up on the forum and then moving it, probably first or second week of February into the vote. So that's my update. Bear, do you want to give an update?
Yeah. Well, for me, during this week, I've been working on a couple of things. One of the important things is to have some initial model that we can start implementing in February for permissionless contributions. I think that's something that has become a priority, and it should be to remain open for contributions from anybody that would like to do them. So I have something pretty simple that I think still needs some work and some integration with actually this conversation of how are we moving on, how are we moving forward with projects. But I think it's something initial that we can start working on. I will also get working at defining a little bit better the roles. I work with Gideon on also not just defining functional roles, but starting to define more like the type of groups of contributors that we have in the TEC in terms of the coordination team, and what does it mean to be a coordinator, what does it mean to be a contributor, what does it mean to be an advisor, so defining these groups and trying to come up with certain activities, responsibilities that they would be taking on in a way, or that they are already taking on, and we're just like formalizing. And also I've been focusing a lot on the budget for February, trying to come up with something that we can all take a look at and feel I don't know if confident is the word, but at least happy to start with that and see how we go during this month, because we will now be taking on this new model for the first time um, of organizing the money, but also like in the way we will be compensated. So it might be a little scary. Uh, I'm not 100% that. Well, I'm 100% that it will definitely need improvement throughout the way, but at least it's something that we can start with. So that's something I want to do today also, like share about the budget and see what everyone thinks. And yeah, I think that's mostly it for me. I'll pass it to Acid.
Thank you, Bear. Some updates. I think the most important is, well, it's not ready, but I'm working out on drafting some threads for a little campaign. I want to take out of the quantifier tutorial video, because we need to present that now, because it's very important. When I have it ready, I would like it to share it on the rewards call, so Mitch, Chris, and Maxwell can see the results, because they were a really important piece in this project. And also, I want to check it out with, especially with Chris, so we can make like a praise TC collaboration in this little campaign. And also, I think there's a new community that is using the praise process, so I would like to check it out with Chris, what's going on with that. And I think that's it. Also, I will share these ideas with Steve, because he always have like a good eye on this stuff. I think, oh yeah, and also working on the new heads of the nouns, on the corrections of the Twitter banner, and yeah, just little things, and yeah. And also, I'm working now with Martin. He's going to send me a new creation service thread, so we can tweet it, and that's almost all. And I can pass it now to maybe to Nate.
Yeah. So quick update is that I really kind of been further defining the interest groups and research groups into what I'm calling the Shelling Point Initiative. It's been kind of a process to really try to put this this effort into kind of the overall TEC framework of what we're trying to accomplish here. And so I've been doing that, working with Joseph right now. And praise to Joseph for all the help and feedback you and Bear have been giving on the SPI. And so, outside of that, working on the roadmap for this Shelling Point initiative is the thing that has been a priority for this week. Joseph has really been thinking about the communication aspects of it, and really how to get the narrative of how we present this to the external communities within the token engineering community. And so that's been the focus for us right now, and you'll learn more about it soon. So I'll pass it back over to Inti.
Sorry, I had to take a quick call. Oh, what is this about? It's updates still?
Just quick updates, yeah.
Um, not really much from my side. We started talking about donations and or other ways to distribute funds this exact same week, and we had a meeting as well with that has something to do with the service, but I guess that's more in the common sense makers sort of field than the TEC. Um, so yeah, no, not really that much from me this week. I don't know if I'm the last one to go or.
Yeah, I think for right now, Marathon Mind and Joseph, what I'd like to do is for right now, we're gonna focus the updates just on like core. Well, that's stupid. Yeah, do you guys want to just give like a quick update?
Yeah, Gideon, just quick update to acid. So the thread is almost done. I mean, I'm doing a thread on experiments on delegation. There's an article I shared recently, so it's almost 95% done. I'll be sharing it by today or tomorrow morning. Yeah, that's it.
And my update is just thinking about communications for the SPI, and also I was talking to Nate with regards to just this morning, or I think yesterday, was talking about. I asked him about making communications into to different languages. Obviously, that requires a bit more thought process with regards to what communications we would want to have in another language, and taking that on board, and really planning it out. But yeah, just my update is just thinking about communication with regards to within TEC and also out, and also thinking about what's the best way to formulate communication with regards to having an action plan at the end of every communication that we post to anything that's going to outside of the anything that's going outside of the TEC community, and things along those lines.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. All right, let's dive into the next topic, which is I just wanted to, before we dive into this whole budgeting process and the kind of well, even the stuff that Nate's going to be talking about with the Shell Employee Initiative, and the work on projects and communications, everything. We are like, this team is like continuing to walk this line of trying to make progress while there's some uncertainty. Like the uncertainty that we had over the last few months was because of the reorganization. We're through that now. We're starting to make some nice progress on like figuring out all of these systems. We're trying to keep moving forward with like making sure the curation service is continuing to run, right sizing that, trying to figure out how to get the interest groups spun up, and then these new processes in place. We're like doing the strategic framework, and then but the big kind of question mark is what this relationship with the Token Engineering Academy looks like, and so that's creating a little bit of uncertainty. So in terms of like where our investments are and where our priorities are, like if we, for example, if you look at that strategic framework, what it says in the first phase of the roadmap is that we really focus on education. And, if that's the case, then that has a lot of implications for how much we invest in the TEC server versus, say, like trying to help the TEA with their engagement of their community. So given that, one of the things that I'm trying to help us create here is some room or runway for autonomy, where we can just focus on some things that we know we've got to do regardless of what happens with the relationship with the academy, how deep that goes. So I think that what that means is that as we're thinking about things like the interest groups, we're thinking about how this, how we can continue to do those in a way that, serves our Discord server, but also could easily be expanded to help the TEA server and maybe other servers. I know Nate's been thinking about that. But even more fundamental than that is the one service that we know we have, the one source of token utility that we know that we have is our reputation as like a source of public goods funding for the token engineering field in our common pool, right? And we know that there are some issues with it right now. That's becoming increasingly clear that the way that that's being managed, we don't have the same kind of funds that we had before. There are some things we probably need to do on that front. And we talked a little bit about those on Tuesday. So for us, like getting a good run, having like over the next several months, really working on that, fixing the common pool and like getting that to a place where, that is really stable. We've taken our operating budget and we're stabilizing that. And I think if we can get to a place where that then allows us to come up with like some more predictable way of setting aside given amounts of funds that maybe could be matched, like using Gitcoin protocol or something along those lines, or even if it's just doing as a way to get there, doing like smaller grant rounds, that will really set us up no matter what we need to do. We know this is something we need to focus on. So I'm seeing that as like a big focus for us over the next few months, and this is something that NT has been thinking about, has had some interesting ideas on that front for a while. So anticipating that will end up being kind of a big focus for us, and that February will probably be a lot of like thinking, planning on that front, in addition to the TEA, some work on that, and then some of these other programs. And I guess the thing that I'm really hoping that we'll be able to do today as we're thinking about these projects is the thing that we've talked about before, which is synergy. So all of these other things that we're doing, let's try to find ways where we can bring them together so that they have like huge interconnection. And so that, it's kind of like that goal that we had early on of swarming. Like, how do we make sure that all the communication stuff we're doing is supporting all the other, like curation and the interest groups, or the SPI, as you guys are calling it now. So basically 3 points. There's going to be some kind of big picture stuff with the TEA and the strategic framework. There's going to be some like planning around the common pool, and then there's going to be these other initiatives that we're doing, like the SPI, and shifting the curation service into kind of more of a maintenance mode, and comms, and figuring out how we can like wrap all those things together to create some synergy. I just want to kind of like frame that up front as we're thinking about this. So before we go on to the next section, I just want to see if people have any thoughts or comments about that, or questions.
I guess my question here, especially in regards to the Token Engineering Academy, this is something that I think removing any sense or of it becoming an obstacle, regardless of this feeling out there or anything like that, if they disagree with the way we move forward, can we just are we able to just disregard that and say, hey, let's really focus on bringing the TE community together and our efforts that we've established so far? And is this going to be something that is going to be something that we constantly trip up on, or is this something that we can just be like, at some point we have to move forward regardless? I guess that's just my big question for everybody. Or is this something that we should be patient with and just take time to let it play out?
Well, I definitely have a perspective on that, but I'd like to hear other people's thoughts. Okay, well, I'll share my views on that. I feel like this has been this question of like, hey, what are these two different entities, the TEC and the TEA? Like, what are these things? Why are these separate? Why are they, it's the obvious question if you're if you're kind of coming into this field and you don't know anything about token engineering and you see these two entities, like why are there these two different entities? And of course, if you look at like what we're actually doing, it is pretty different. But I think that in a world where this is a pretty small field still, right? Building synergy, building connection, building interoperability between, or not interoperability, but like collaboration between these two entities is like, it's just so important. And so my answer would be that, there's going to be a few months, we kind of had some tensions over the last few months as we were kind of figuring out the contours of these relationships. And yet, like on a personal level, there's great personal relationships that span the entities. So my answer is that I think, Nate, right now, as we're in kind of a trust rebuilding phase where we're like trying to make sure that everybody's feeling good about where these things are going. So I would say that from my perspective, that really is the highest priority, is making sure that these relationships are good, and that we figure out if there are areas that are questions, then we just figure out some good ways of getting those questions resolved proactively, rather than proceeding and then like bumping into things and then trying to fix problems. It's just like, let's use advice process, I guess.
Yeah, just to mention something else that I was thinking is that I don't know if we start following like this new strategic framework and education being kind of like this first phase that we will be going through. I think it would be interesting to rethink and replan what exactly do we mean with education, because I feel that even with whatever happens with the academy, I think there will be other initiatives running in parallel that also follow that goal of education, just like the interest groups and research groups. I think they are a way of educating people in the field, right? And just like that, there will probably be more initiatives and maybe even more collaborations with other entities that are not the academy strictly, and that will also promote this idea of educating people. So I think we should definitely keep pursuing the relationship and the partnership with the academy, because I also agree it's important. But I don't think that would mean that we should just close ourselves to other opportunities and to other possibilities of collaborating with other people and in other fronts in relation with education, right? So yeah, I feel that there's some things that we can keep exploring there. Yeah.
Yes, I really agree with Blair. Since I am here in TEC, I see the Token Engineering Academy as part of the family of, of our community. We are we are really similar. We have similar values and mission. There are, in time ago, there were too many people from here there and many people from there here. So I feel like a special connection. The times have been changing. It's very different now. But yeah, I agree with Bear. We don't have to be just there. We might look the possibility for look to many other spaces that are related to us. But yeah, I really agree with Bear's opinion.
Okay, any other thoughts on this before we move on? Questions, thoughts? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. So, Bear, do you want to take it over on the budgeting front?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll send here in the chat. First, before jumping into the actual budget, I just like to really quickly show everyone this document that I just shared on the chat in relation with the permissionless contributions. Just pretty quickly, so everyone has an idea of how does that look like, and how will that also have an effect on the actual budget. I'm not able to share screen, but if people can access it, or if someone could share screen as well, that'd be great. So
I can share it.
okay, thank you. Okay, so basically, I've been thinking about different type of permissionless contributions that we could have in the team. Some of them probably could have been, they could be like bounties and that kind of stuff. But right now we're not focusing on that. Right now we were trying to come up with some sort of like permissionless role that people can just plug in based on their interest and they're willing to contribute. And you probably remember the Twitter content creator role that was part of the functional roles list. I think this could be a really good role to take as an example and see how it works with this approach of permissionlessness. So basically, it's almost the same structure that we had before. It has a purpose. It has the accountabilities. It will have the owners. But what I'm adding here is just to the spots that I'm calling. Like how many people could have this role, could own this role at a certain point. And then we would attach to this role a monthly budget to be distributed between those 3 people every month. So that's basically it. If you go a little bit to the bottom, you can see kind of like a suggested workflow process that I'm thinking for this specific role. But I think we can jump into this maybe a little later when we start talking more about the actual communication strategy, or the Twitter strategy, because it relates more with that. So that's all I wanted to show you, like give you a little context about this role and the allocation of funds that we will be adding to this role. That is, like you can see here, it's still undefined. So that's something we need to consider. Well, now I'll share the budget document for February. Just give me a second.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but would somebody else mind streaming these documents? Because I'm realizing I want to take notes. Very hard to do.
I'll stream it.
Thanks.
Yeah, and also I don't know if anyone has any question or observation about this, like this permissionless role, or at least that the idea was clear enough.
Yeah, so I guess I do have a question regarding that. We had the defined roles for the what we would consider the core contributing team, and distributing ownership. I was thinking about this in terms of the permissionless aspect of it, where if you have somebody who's maybe Acid is in charge of this entire Twitter content communications thing. However, there might be some functions within that role that can be if we were to divide those functions into like payment categories of saying, hey, like if the entire role is getting like $800 a month, maybe $200 goes to content creation, 100 goes to actually Twitter management, so on and so forth. We break it down that way. Would it be possible, like, are you thinking like that, if Joseph wanted to be like, hey, I want to really focus on content creation for the Twitter role, he can say, hey, I want to do this, and we have some type of process to onboard him into owning that portion of the role, and then we have the distribution of funds according to of the larger defined roles. So we just pay by function within each of those roles. Is that kind of like the direction that you're heading with this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's similar approach. Probably, I would say that maybe the compensation part of it, it's still not super clear, even to me. Like, but the other parts, yeah, I think for communication side of it, currently we have 3 roles defined. One of them being like the communication strategist, that is would be kind of like the leading person in terms of the strategy and all the efforts in terms of the communication for the TEC. Then we have we're calling it the Twitter operator, that is more in charge of the actual posting and being in the platform, maintaining it, engaging with people, that kind of stuff. Those 2 roles, what I'm thinking is that they are more like functional, that someone needs to own it, like one single person owns those roles. Well, not one person, the 2 of them. I mean, like one person for each role. Like they have like its individual owner. And then the content creator one was a third one that was also designed that way. But then I thought that maybe for these specific tasks of creating content for either that can be Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube, articles, whatever, we could maybe have this different type of role that could allow more flexibility and more openness in terms of the people that would be taking on this role, that they wouldn't have to be coordinators, for example. It could be anyone. And for example, I know that Marathon Mind and Joseph are people that could be really interested in this. So this would be like a really simple way for them to plug into the work and not really having to carry kind of like the responsibility of being a coordination still. And this also in a way builds up some sort of initial reputation for people that want to start contributing, that can help them in a way progress and eventually maybe even become a coordinator as well. So it's like an initial door for contributing. And now in terms of compensation, yeah, that's where a little bit of a question mark we have currently still. But for now, for this coming month, I was just thinking on trying to come up with a defined amount that we can attach to this role that would be divided between the 3 people that take on it, and just define a way in which we distribute that funding. I added some options here at the bottom. We can probably talk about that later or on another day, but that kind of be like the initial idea. I don't know if it made sense, Nate.
Can I add one more thing on this? I think also, like where you're at, Nate, is really more in the project phase still. Like, I think that, what you're doing, you've been doing in January, and it sounds like still doing some more in February, is like detailing out what this is going to look like. And it sounds like part of what you're asking, you and Joseph are working on together, is like thinking about like the comms aspects of that. So I feel like that's going to be more like in this phase, like the project budget for SBI, and figuring out like really how much of that goes to what aspects of those plans, the project plans. But that out of that, there will be some, like, you will probably define some ongoing processes that need to be done as part of keeping the interest groups running. We're going to have to balance that against all the other budgeting demands that we've got, right, for the operating budget, the roles. But that's another way of looking at that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's the kind of the challenging part, is distinguishing between like what is actually going to be project based versus what is role based, and like, are we, how do we specifically, if it is project based, like how do I kind of onboard people into, like if Joseph has been a huge help, and how do I make sure that we're looking after him and making sure that we're saying, hey, let's make sure that you're getting something for these contributions early on as we're figuring all this out. So I think that as we get more clarity on it, I think that this is going to be a good approach. But I think we all just need to be educated in terms of like our efforts to make sure that we're working within the budget constraints that we do have moving forward, and making sure that we're able to enable this permissionless contributions without walking that fine line between exploitation and compensation. So that's one of those things that we have to really be clear and explicit about with the people that are participating in this, because I think it's fair for everybody who wants to contribute to know exactly what the rules are and how we move forward.
Yeah, I think expectation setting is kind of basically that's the name of the game. That's what we're trying to do right now, and it's just a little bit rough. I mean, Bear's had kind of a Herculean task actually trying to figure out what this looks like, and on a pretty tight timetable. And as he said, like it's not going to be perfect in this first month, and it's probably going to take us a little while to kind of like get this all figured out. So I really do hope that everybody just assumes best intentions, and we will get this figured out. I think the hard part is, Marathon Mind and Joseph, like it's going to be, right now we weren't really anticipating, to be honest, bringing on additional folks onto the coordination team quite right now, right? So we're trying to find ways for you guys to plug in. The budget is tight, so we're trying to find ways for you to plug in, get experience, and like get familiar with the community. But we're still figuring this out. So yeah, please everybody be patient as we do so.
Yeah, so agreeing with everyone, with everything that has been said. I think something that will help us is maybe now just to jump into the actual budget. Thank you, Nate, for sharing the screen. So we can focus right now here on the left part of the document. Here is where it's all kind of like broken down. I broke it down in three kind of like different categories. The first one being like the expenses that we have as a coordination team, that currently is only like the payment for Clarity, that is $45 a month. Then the recurring type of contributions, that's where I'm fitting all the list of functional roles. And this is the coordinator roles. This is also something that like I mentioned in the updates that I've been working on with Gideon, and trying to define these the different responsibilities, but also some sort of compensation for this group in particular for having the responsibility of being a coordinator. So that, for example, that includes attending calls during the month, and that sort of like constant attention that we put into the TEC as coordinators. So for that, what is being budgeted is 12 hours a month for each coordinator. I don't remember how much is that. Let's see. So that's around $252 a month for having like a coordinator role, for being part of the coordinator team. I have another document where it's more defined, like the actual kind of like the purpose of being a coordinator, a more like in-depth definition. We can talk about that later or in another moment. But just for your reference, this is what this cost is. And then at the end, we have like the on-demand contributions. We have the projects and the permissionless contributions. As you can see, there's nothing for permissionless contributions, as we haven't been able to truly define how much would be appropriate for this kind of like initial experiment in that front. And depending on how much we decide on that will have an effect on the projects. So if we decide to have, let's say, just 500, that will define the budget we will have for the projects in February. that it's all based on a available budget of 8,400 that we defined previously, based on the on our spending rates and based on how many months do we want our funds to last. That based on this available budget, if we keep it like this, it will last us to go all the way to the end of March. So yeah, that's something to consider. And yeah, that's basically it. Everything else is just more to keep track of things and see at the end of the month how we actually went. But that's basically the project for the budget for now. So I think it would be just a matter of seeing what people think. And yeah, I don't know, I'd be really open and really curious to think about what people think in terms of the amount for permissionless contributions. How should we handle that? How should we take that in consideration? And then we can also begin the conversation about how are we going to allocate the funds for projects based on all the projects that we have mentioned that we're thinking on doing. And how does that look like? How does compensation look like with projects? So yeah, I'll open the floor for now, see if anyone has any questions, any comments.
I think it looks really good, Bear, and I really appreciate you doing this. Like Gideon said, this is definitely a Herculean task in terms of just making sure that we have a compensation model that works with our budget at this moment, and making sure that we kind of maintain that permissionless contributions. I guess my big question moving forward is, when it comes to the budget, this project's number here, is this kind of, do you anticipate this being pretty consistent, like month to month, based off of our funding? And would this, how much of this would require us to break down the projects in terms of prioritization? So if I say for the Schilling Point Initiative, for example, if we have the next 6 months planned, and maybe it takes 80% of that each month for the projects, do we have to make decisions based off of that? And maybe Inti has something going on with the curation service or anything else that needs to be in this category. I guess my question is this number flexible, or is this something that's static and that we have to really adjust the project side of things?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nate. First of all, I think it's really important to have in mind that this budget, it will only work for us for February and March. We should have that time horizon in our head while doing these exercises of budgeting, because at that point we'll run out of funds and we'll probably need to submit another funding proposal that will look completely different, right? And we'll probably consider more projects and more time and more funding probably. So right now this is just an exercise to get us through all the way through March. Having said that, yeah, the idea would be that we have kind of like a defined project budget for February and for March that wouldn't vary a lot, because everything is based on these recurring contributions that are fixed, or supposedly are fixed. Then the project ones, it's also kind of fixed. The other one that varies a little bit is the permissionless contributions, but hopefully if we are able to define it with anticipation for this month, it should stay the same for March as well. So then that will give us a little bit of predictability, at least for these 2 months, in terms of the funding for projects. But then yes, then it's a matter of prioritizing. I feel that the list of projects we have is quite extensive. I think there are 4 or 5 projects out there. And yeah, figuring out how are we going to prioritize which, and how are we going to divide the funds, and just to throw an idea, and one of the things that I've been thinking about, and this was suggested by, well, I've been hearing it from a couple of people. Maybe as a possibility that we can do is to, just prioritize the projects that we'll be taking on February. Let's say we'll do 3, we'll do 4. And then based on this budget, we just divided it by percentages. We distribute it accordingly between those 3 projects, and then the projects, they know that they have that amount to work with during this month, and they will need to adjust all their work, all their efforts to that amount. Then that way, we wouldn't probably have to worry too much about tracking hours, because that's kind of like the other part of it, like the burden when we work with projects. Like, how do we measure how much it costs? How do we estimate how much it's going to cost? And we can try to do the exercise, but it's probably not going to be accurate at the end of the month, whatever estimate we do. And it's more time consuming, it's more energy consuming. So maybe this way of having like distributed budgets between the projects that we define could be a way to solve that. It's just a thing that I'm been thinking. But yeah, sorry, I hope I answered your questions, Nate.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
One other thing to add on that is that basically, if you think about this, what's happening is you've got a DAO, right, where it's not supposed to be centralized, right? But what's happening is, like, the way that the TEC was originally set up was that you would have working groups, or basically sub DAOs, that could pitch a proposal to then take on a specific like set of work. Well, in a lot of cases earlier on, that work was not that well defined, and there wasn't a lot of accountability. And so what we're doing is now coming up with a process for saying, like, hey, if you're going to pitch to the common pool, and you're asking for some funds, then you should give, like, here are the goals that you intend. These are the impacts or the outcomes you tend to achieve in the funding period, and you will be held accountable for that. If you don't do that, then your likelihood of getting funded next time probably is going to go down a little bit. And so what we're doing now is saying, like, okay, with that amount of money that has been allocated to this group, this sub-DAO, how do we decide where we're going to prioritize? And so, what Bear is talking about is the percentage approach, like percentage allocation to different projects. It probably simplifies things a lot. Then we don't get stuck in trying to build like bottoms up, like hour by hour estimates, like for each one of these projects. That will kill us. It's just not a good use of time, I think. And the other thing that it will allow us to do is to go out to the broader community, not through like a vote, because the voting mechanism has already happened through the allocation, but more kind of like an advice process. So being able to like turn to people like Tam and Livia and Griff and just say, like, hey, here's the things we're thinking about. What do you all think? We'd like to get your, just as like advice process, not actually binding, guidance or anything like that, but it's more like, so it's not just us weighing in on these decisions about how we're spending the funds, but we're getting some external input, and maybe even from like a set of external advisors too. So, we won't be doing that like right now, but I think longer term, that would be like good practice, kind of help us set those percentages and get feedback on it.
Well, I do think that it is a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate it, but I think, as I told you about yesterday, and I had a small conversation with Eden today, I believe that's overly complex for less than 5 people team, really. And I'm not I'm just not really convinced that it's going to provide any better results overall. I think there's a fair amount of increased overhead, and I still don't have clear how um, like the i- the increased amount of how to say this. So you have very well defined roles, and so like what I'm getting is the impression that what at first we started talking about how people was going to be able to float around roles and whatnot, and how coordination team would just only be about the most essential roles to coordinate the commons and all of that. But now it's a set of really well defined roles that I get the impression that may not be well suited for such a small team, that where people have to constantly go around and change hats and do a bit of everything. But then on top of that, you also have another structure, which is projects. And I don't think it may bring um, more accountability, but uh, I don't think the increased amount of accountability is goes in proportion to the amount of overhead it provides, especially again being such a small team where there's a lot of I guess trust and other things we can rely on to just to notice and take action when someone is not making any work. And so it seems overly complex for 5 people, and then seems like it probably wouldn't scale well if when we need to include more people in this coordination team.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the roles, yeah, I think the idea it's still the same. Like it hasn't changed. Uh, the idea was that these roles are the essential, are like that's what they were called, like the functional needs, and that hasn't changed. Like I haven't added like any other role that wasn't based on that, and that was all I think agreed by everyone, and that everyone agreed on those type of like basic needs that we had to cover on the operations of the TEC. So that is that's for the roles. There hasn't been any more like stuff added to it. Like there might be a couple of roles, like for example the curation service role that we were talking yesterday, NT. Yeah, that could probably be revisited, and we could reevaluate if it makes sense to have that sort of role at least for February and for March. And if we agree that is probably not essential, we can definitely just get rid of it, or just like put it in hibernation mode for the future. But yeah, they are still functional. They are still like essential. That has been always the intention with them. And in terms of the overhead, yeah, I think more than overhead, or at least the way I look at it, is just having a little bit of order, and a basic structure that we can follow. I think a team of 5 people, if you think about it, it's actually a lot of people. If we think about this, for example, as a small business, a small business of 5 people, it's already something big. You need to have certain reports, certain control. Even though it's a group of friends that have all the trust in the world, there always has to be something that backs up that trust, and that, especially in the context that we are, like the DAO, the transparency, the accountability principles that we like to follow. I think this just like strengthens that, like having ways in which we can remain accountable, and in which we can provide reports and show progress, and just prove the way we are utilizing funds in this case. I think that will never be like of a waste of work. On the contrary, I think it brings benefits. And also I think I think I wouldn't agree much on the idea that this wouldn't scale. I think that that's actually the intention with this, is that when we get more people, more contributors, like for example, right, I'm Joseph and Marathon Mind, like with more people getting into the team and into the DAO, things get more complex. But if we don't have anything, if we don't have any base, if we don't have any basic structure that we can start building on, it will be a complete chaos probably. And we've lived that already, like the TEC a year ago was completely different, and a lot of these patterns were happening at that time, mostly because of this, I feel. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that, again, this is perfect. This is way far from being perfect, but this is just like an initial step, an initial stone that we are putting in building this foundational base for the DAO to grow in the future and to remain I don't know what's the word, but to remain like in good health in the future, no matter how many people, no matter what the circumstances are in the future. We know that we are doing things right and that we have a solid model that we can rely on. I think that's the intention with this. So yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that real quick, because I do like see the perspective that Inti has in terms of the intentions that we originally had in terms of being flexible and moving into different roles and the compensation for that. But at the end of the day, I think the one thing that we really have to do if we want to continue having building that trust with the TEC community and the TEC token holders is the accountability aspect. This is something that we did not have at all before with the working groups, where we had these independent working groups with no oversight who were basically just kind of pillaging the common pool. And so this is something that the accountability part of it is huge in terms of the roles, making sure that the people that are participating here know exactly what they're responsible for and what their defined functions that they're responsible for doing, because it's a lot of work for 5 people. It really is. For the compensation that we do have. And I do think that the structure that Bear has proposed does scale well. And it may not seem that way right now because of the budget constraints, but I always like to imagine the ideal system as taking this structure that we've created. Now just imagine it had unlimited funding. How amazing that would be if we could just say, hey, we're going to compensate these role areas and define the functions, put a price on those functions. We can pay for permissionless contributions for those functions. I think that this is it doesn't seem ideal right now because of the budget constraints, but if you were to put it into like this ideal framework of like, hey, we have unlimited operations funding, I do think this is the right approach. Even if in the short term it lacks kind of clarity that this is going to work.
But
So go ahead.
is that in theory or is that in practice? Well, my point really is I believe things should be modeled after nature or how things naturally flow. I do agree that for the whole year or for the most part of the year, the TC has had some issues. But if and I think things should be iterated. We should always try to go towards iterations of things that work, right? Instead of doing things from scratch and based on theory, because they may not go well, and we may lose the advantages of things that we already have. If someone can point me to any critical failure or something that actually didn't work of how we have been working the past few months, I would agree more. But the past few months, we are 5 people, and I say five people in our case is not a lot of people because none of us is full time, and so we are 5 people, not even full time. The past few months, I think reporting back could be improved, like just having something of what people actually did work on. But I think overall, we all know sort of the domain of everyone. more or less what everyone has been working on. And unless I'm mistaken, and someone can point out compensation and other things, people have been fairly um, fair with the amount of funds they requested month by month. Um, and I was going to say something else, but essentially, why risk it? Because like, and again, I think a lot of this work is worth. So, for instance, I do appreciate a lot, especially the roles, for example. But I think those are more helpful as signal and things as tools to help us rather than boxes to put us into. Because again, if someone can point me to a critical failure of how we've been working since we started this coordination team, I would change my mind, or that would change my mind more easily. But as it stands right now, it's more work for marginal increase in or for marginal advantages overall.
I mean, I can give you like an example of like a potential failure, but you know it takes time for these things to kind of break down. For example, Rex was you know, taking a significant part of the initial coordination team that we have right now into the you know, the management of credentials management. And so right now I feel that, you know, his absence is kind of hard, and you know, we haven't really talked about his absence, and maybe perhaps we don't know if he's maintaining the credentials management or how to go about the process of, you know, adding things, or you know, getting permission to manage the Discord or anything like that. But these things can slip through the cracks, and so that's the one potential area that I think that, you know, is, it could be an example of like there's some vital functional things that need to be taken care of as we move forward with this coordination team, and without the roles and the accountability aspects of it, these things can slip through the crack and cause a lot of trouble when it comes to like developing projects or doing the day-to-day operations that we have throughout the work. And so making sure that these functions are covered and that people are accountable for managing those functions, I think is really, really important, and something that we shouldn't take for granted. So I think it's something to keep an eye out. I don't think there's been any failures as of what we've been doing past, but I think there's a lot of potential for it. So I just wanted to add that.
And how these solves that exactly?
Can I just add something? Just, I mean, I think that the first thing I would say, NT, is we need to be really careful not to overcomplicate things, right? This is a small team, and so you know, if we like throw a lot of overhead at things, that's just going to take away from our ability to fulfill the mission. So I think that the job right now is, you know, we've done a lot. Bear has really done a lot of work on the role, defining roles, and I think we've got something that's pretty good. And I mean, it's you know, it's flexible. We can change it over time. I don't think that there's huge issues that you're raising there. It's more on the project management side of things, is what I'm hearing. And what I would say is that so now we need to tune the project management thing and keep it as simple as possible while still doing the job. What I would say is that you know, you're asking like examples of where this has proven a problem in the past, and I think that we as a team have not been like functioning all that long as a separate coordination team. It's really just been December and a good chunk of January, and we've been making some progress on things, but I do think that, you know, we are laying the foundations for how we're hoping that coordination will work for this commons going forward. And without going into a whole bunch of detail on it, I think that we've seen in the TEC and in DAOs more generally, but like in the TEC specifically, examples where there were very questionable projects that just started up, and got momentum and then died and, ended up squandering a lot of resources that could have actually gone towards this mission of strengthening the field of token engineering. So that's the thing for me that is really driving this. Like, how do we, one, make sure that we've got some good accountability in place, not just for the processes, but for the new work that we are deciding to take on behalf, as we steward the commons. So that's a really important thing, that kind of that accountability. And then the other piece that I think is really worth talking about is that as an organization, as an economy, we've been pretty good with the emergent side of things, but not so good with the moving in a direction side of things. And if you look at even very decentralized initiatives like Ethereum, whatever, there is a vision there that's moving them forward that is part of why it's so attractive. So I think part of what we're trying to do here is come up with the processes for figuring out the new initiatives, the new work, and how we can move from big visions into okay, what does this mean for next month? And projects are really, I think, the way of doing that. And so the question is, how do you apply accountability processes into projects, and the way that those are organized? And the way that I see this, and I don't know if everybody agrees with this, but to me, I feel like trust is really the essence of how small teams work well. And I think that trust, when you scale it up, starts to look like reputation. And so what I'm hoping that we're going to build here is a model where, you come into the TEC, you don't carry in a lot of reputation, it's all about building that reputation and that trust. But, we build stepping stones for people to build that reputation. And I think the roles, where it's known workflows, the roles are a great way to do that. And so, but when it comes to deciding and organizing kind of the next initiatives, that's something that I think we need to reserve for people who have built verified trust, verified reputation within the community. And so I think what we're going to end up with is probably a system where we come up with fairly simple ways for allocating a fixed budget for the project, which is what Bear is suggesting is percentages. And then assigning an organizer for each one of those projects who will have a fair amount of freedom to then divvy that project budget up as they see, they will have the trust of the crew here, and the trust by extension of the community. And so I think that we'll be able to do this in a way that doesn't get us too hung up on too much overhead, but allows us to have a point of accountability where we go and anybody can say hey, how come the such and such project is not moving forward? And there will be one person there who we can go to and say, what's going on, right? And so I think it's really important in a world where we're not relying on kind of traditional hierarchical management structures, but we're holding each other accountable to be able to have some type of structure like that. And last point is, we're kind of figuring this out, but we know some of the things that haven't worked in the past, and so we're trying to figure out the things that do. And my big takeaway from your comments are, hey, how do we do this in a way that keeps it simple and doesn't introduce too much complexity or overhead? I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the last thing I want to do is, especially for Bear, to feel like I'm saying anything about his work. If anything, I really appreciate it. But I think it's not like it's not even that it's not useful. I think, in the contrary, I think we can use all of it. But I think it's more a matter of how. Because say, for example, if we were to introduce these to what we already do, it would look more like, or use what we already have, incorporate new things that would improve it, would look more like people have a set amount of time limited. Say we currently have around 20 hours per person, and then people could get even assigned a role or a project or whatever. But but I just don't think people should be limited by roles or by the project. I think that's a huge mistake for a team. But I do think that we organize in teams precisely to be able to have more flexibility, and to be able to navigate across better. And so if and that's also the reason why we introduced the monthly things, right? And so the idea is, by the beginning of the month, I say what I'm going to do. By the end of the month, I present what I did, plus the roles that were sort of in line with those things. If if what I say I did and the roles or whatever match what I'm requesting, that's that's then an accountability checkup to get paid or whatever. But in the other side, if I have to pick one role, if I have to pick one project, 1,000 things can go wrong. It's probably more complex, and people in the team lose flexibility, because then their primary way to do or to look at things is determined by the role or the project, instead of the velocity, which would be a more predictable or fixed time allocated, for example.
Can I?
I think that's mostly my thing.
I was going to say the kind of to, well, not to Anti's point, but I was going to say, would you suggest then there be would you suggest that it's done for a limited amount of people? So let's say, for example, 3 people were to carry on, were to take on the raw system, see how it their workflow, and how they contribute to projects and so forth, and then give feedback based on that. Or are you saying that it should be sorted out and defined what's going to happen to everybody's roles, whether we're going to take the roles route approach, or we're just going to do what you guys were doing before?
Can you repeat it, please? I don't think I quite understood the question.
So the question that I proposed would be, would you say that it would be best fit for, let's say, 3 people amongst the core contributors now to use the role structure that's been proposed now, and the rest of the contributors to carry on doing what they're doing before, and see how it affects their productivity, their workflow, and so forth for a limited amount of time, and then go through a review process? Or are you saying that we shouldn't, or we should go through with what Bear's proposed with regards to the roles?
I think we should, in my opinion, we should, because we've been running for a small period of time, but the period has been going great. And so if you ask me, I would keep most of it running the same, but then identify those things and solve them up, instead of switching up the whole thing, right? Because it is already working. And so if there's problems with accountability, or if there's problem with how fast or how agile we are in terms of our work, then one thing could be what we proposed, Brad and I proposed at the beginning of January, of spinning up and having clear expectations and clear deliverables by the end of the month. And if I need some help or some clarity around something, I can use the roles document, and I can use the project management processes document to guide me. But I'm not strictly determined by or what I do is not strictly determined by how the role moves. Because then I essentially, it's like chicken egg, but I think the flexibility and the agility of having contributor first, role second is better than the other way around, which is roles first, contributor second.
I see what you're saying, Inti, and I think that I don't think you should see the roles as being this kind of like boxed in, like this is what you do, and this is the only thing that you're doing. I think the benefit of being able to have that flexibility to say, hey, we have this project, how can I plug in? And whether that be a part of the defined roles that we have or not, I can participate in that and get compensated for that activity. And I agree with that 100%. But I do think having the roles defined allows us to say, hey, regardless of how you plug into a particular project, for example, this is, as a coordinator, this is your area of responsibility to make sure that these functions are being taken care of, regardless whether it's by you or by somebody you delegate that task to or function to, and saying, hey, but outside of that, like, I can work and get compensated for how I plug in on a month-to-month basis, and I do agree with that. But I do think both of them are important. I just think it's a matter of perspective of how you're looking at it. I don't think we should be looking at it as like I'm in this role, therefore I'm boxed into this role. And so I agree with that 100%. I feel like, if you want to work on the SPI and you figure out a way to plug into that, then like let's go for it. Yeah, and you should be able to report that to the budget and say, hey, this is how we compensate for that. But yeah.
But well, maybe I'm wrong, but what I heard or what I understood is that is essentially the compensation will be determined by that. And so if I take on X amount of roles and if I scope out X amount of projects, that's going to sum up my compensation, instead of saying, hey, here you have X amount of time, you do what you well, not like that, right? But you do what you can, so, sort of saying like, you have 20 hours for a week for this month, say what you're going to do, and those 20 hours will determine how much of that you can do or how much you can fit into 1 month, instead of because now, for example, at least in my case, right, none of the projects have really taken off, and the things I do sort of constantly that would be considered roles aren't that many. I'm now in the air with just a few hours a month for the roles, and then I have to get lucky if I can get one project to take off.
Yeah. And so I think,
well, just to finish, and then that misses the things in the gray area that we contribute towards, that may not be that may appear at last second, and or that we may, for X or Y reason, we may not be extremely included into any role or project. And so if there's a role and project first, contributor second, then I'm more like a bounty guy that can come in and out at every second. And I think that puts us in less advantages, but also incentives more sort of mercenary behavior. Because if I just don't understand how we want a team of coordinators expected to have some reserve time, but then we want to move things with outside of time, if that makes sense.
and we can mitigate for that if we just, we can. I agree. And I think, maybe we have a kind of a smaller budget within this budget that we have articulated for the functional roles, and more to actual projects, to where we have a priorities of our projects and say, okay, if we have a ton of projects, you can plug in where you want, and you can be compensated for that as the majority of the compensation you'll get for that month, rather than saying the majority of mine comes from these functional roles, which I only give X amount of hours to. So maybe we can shift like more of the budget towards heavier on the project side of things and have more projects to fund. But yeah, I think that's really good feedback in terms of like, what we can do with, maybe Bear has some thoughts on it, but yeah, I think that's a really good feedback for it. Because it does put it, if you only have a couple roles or maybe just one role, and you're a coordinator, like it's hard. Maybe you're not plugged into a project. So, yeah.
So I have a couple of ideas to throw out. So one is, if we want to, so I still actually believe strongly in this approach, but I feel like we're getting some feedback on that we need to tune this a little bit. And what I'm hearing is two areas that we may need to tune. One is, hey, are we creating enough flexibility? And can somebody also take notes in our agenda as we're going? Because when I'm talking, it's hard for me to know what I'm saying. But one of the things I was going to say is that, maybe so one problem is flexibility. So let's say that, Enti, you have not signed up for any role relating to Twitter, but like mid-month, there's like some need where you're like, we need you to like drop in and do some work on Twitter, right? Well, okay, then, like if this is too mercenary and it's too role driven, then like there's no flexibility. Like it becomes difficult to like justify doing that. It's just goodness of your heart. So maybe part of what the solution is here is take the coordinator role and build in some buffer where it's like, yeah, there's some extra time that we're allocating for people to be able to, people who are on kind of on the coordination team specifically to be able to lend a hand and help out with other things. And it's kind of like a discretionary pool. So that's one thought. And then the second thought is specifically for you, NT, but also people who are, playing a role that's more project driven, role driven, which for me, the way that I'm seeing this anyways, is people who have built up trust within the community and can be trusted to run projects. The last thing that we want to do is create disincentives for people to be willing to take on those roles, right? Because those are super important roles for the commons. And so what I'm hearing is essentially that the way this is currently structured, it creates a good deal of risk, right? Because it varies from month to month. The flow of projects, that's one problem. The other is like, what if the project that was selected by, no fault of the person who organizing it ends up being a dud, right? Or we end up having to change strategy because a partner shows up and says, hey, I don't want you to do it. Whatever it is, right? So that's one thing. And then I think there's one other point about that having to do with the inconsistency. Oh, and then the second thing you're saying is, then that'd be just like a contractor for hire, like a hired gun, right? And that's not, that just doesn't feel like what we're trying to create here. So for those roles, maybe we need to build in a little bit more stability into those kind of like, organizer, project organizer type roles, so that there's some kind of built-in stability there, so that people know, hey, yeah, I am like somebody who been qualified as like a project organizer, and yeah, I have a certain amount of flexibility with my funding, and some of it's going to be based on the projects, and some of it on that kind of base role of like project organizer. Those are two thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, that approach as well. I think we could try it out. I also think that, for example, this idea of having like a buffer in the coordinator's roles for like extra work or extra activities that that coordinators do. I think that could, or at least in my mind, I was considering it as probably you could come up with a smaller project, even almost even like a task that you can assign a price or assign a budget to it, and you can complete it that way and doesn't have to fit into a role. The way I see it is that projects gives you all of this flexibility, and roles gives you, and I really liked how Nate said, like, gives you responsibility. Like these roles are more like in terms of responsibility of the that the coordinators need to take on. So, but we could still like try different things out. The only thing that I wanted to mention is that, yeah, for sure, like I think we could spend more time like thinking about the ways in which we can improve this and really tackle like the little detail and make it the best as we can. The only thing that would concern me is that like we're like 4 or 5 days away from February, and ideally we would start implementing whatever we decide on. We would start implementing it for that time. So right now, like trying to, for example, Lenti, this new approach that you were suggesting, yeah, I mean, I'm totally open to it, but it would be a matter of like, do you want to like draft a new model, a new approach during these days to see if we can incorporate it to this so we can use in February, or should we take more time? Should we postpone this? Like in terms of timing, I don't see. I'm still not clear how could we go about this, especially because we have this other huge issue that it's actually defining the projects we're going to be working on. So in terms of like time constraint and February getting closer, I'd be a little concerned on that. And I feel that if we start February without nothing, like without no model, without not having a clear model to begin with, then things will probably get a little bit more complicated throughout the month. So that's just kind of like a comment. And also I was going to say, yeah, I think I forgot, but yeah, I mean, I also like this idea of maybe we could potentially increase the funds for projects and decrease it for roles. I feel that could be a quick, an easy tweak that we could do to the model for February. So yeah.
Just very quickly, and a few comments, and that's probably the last thing I'm going to say, because I guess we have some other things on the agenda. But first, for example, the what you said, Gideon, sounds better, but I'm still not sure about the projects. The thing is, budgeting projects makes more sense when you have a dedicated team to the project. But most of the projects we've been working on lately, we use resources from people that under this model would already be paid by a certain role. So, for instance, in the creation service, there's Asset Laser who would have Twitter roles, right? And he's already been paid for Twitter roles. So essentially, then the budgeting overhead of the project ends up being you that are going to lead the project say how much are you going to pay yourself to lead the project, and you sum up a few projects, because we usually work on more than one at the same time, and then you have something closer to a salary, but it's not a salary because we don't want to pay salaries or hourly or whatever to project managers. So it's ended up being more complicated to do project-based work, really. And at the end of the day, it incentivizes a lot, again, mercenary stuff, because then if Gibbeth says they have another project and they for some reason pay more, I may as well just try that, because the thing is salaries and things like that aren't usually just because of work, but also because of loyalty. Say I don't think that's the proper word, but you expect people to have a reserve time when you set to allocate resources on time instead of projects, and I think that's the only issue. I have with project based, because right now we cannot afford to have people that are not incentivized to have some level of loyalty to the TEC, because if without, like, we are 5 people, without any of us, I think things would get pretty ugly pretty fast. If we were more people and then we have some projects on the side that are not that important, it may make more sense, right? And then as far as timelines, I'm really not sure, and this is why I said early on that we should probably try to do smaller changes, because for most people it seems like this works well. But from our conversation yesterday, you are essentially, if we take on this, you're essentially asking me to take a big hit on what I expect to make and how I expect to work. And I honestly don't think that that's fair, but I also don't have any solution with regards to time, because I would have hoped that changes were smaller on each period.
So I have a suggestion, because we do have other topics, but and because this is, I mean, really, it is falling disproportionately on your shoulders, just because, well, you're being trusted to do like some big projects. So this whole project issue is kind of like hitting you the most. So my recommendation is you and I, and maybe Bear, break off and talk about how we get this right, because it's, I mean, fundamentally the thing we're discussing is like how to do this in a way that's fair and serves the TEC. And like, if you feel like this is not fair, and I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think you're raising some really good points. So I think we just have to figure out how to tweak this so that this works for you. And then, but I'm suggesting that we basically move that to a separate conversation and then report back to folks maybe next week with what we come up with. Does that sound fair? Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, just to quickly clarify that, well, we talked yesterday, NT, it wasn't at all like me imposing anything to you. Like, it was all based on what I've seen and from what I've heard about different members in the team, of you being more interested in projects, and you telling me that there weren't many areas of the roles that you were interested in. So it was all based on that. It was not at all intentionally trying to decrease the type of compensation you had. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so we will follow up on this. And NT, I mean, by the way, I actually do believe that the figuring out this common pool thing is going to take a pretty big chunk of our budget and our time, my sense. But okay, we will follow up. Baby Bear, can you see if we can find a time, like Friday or like early next week, to talk about this, the three of us?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so Nate, shit, man, let's see. What should we do here? So we need to talk about a few things. Here's my question to you, Nate. I don't know. We talked about 20 minutes for reviewing the Shelling Point stuff, but how would you be comfortable with doing that on Tuesday with the larger group, like they included Tam and?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so let's move that to Tuesday. I think you'll get some good feedback from that broader group too. Sorry about that, but actually, it may end up being that may be a better way to do it.
No worries. Let's focus on the priorities that we have right now.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, actually, just like a shout out to the stuff that Nate has done. You know, how he's evolving interest groups. It's super exciting. I do have a few questions, and that now that I've thought about it a little bit, so I'm looking forward on Tuesday. But it's really, I think it's really exciting. Okay, so I think the thing what we need to figure out, what's really important is we could do the Twitter workflow thing right now, But I feel like actually what we've got to do is figure out our process for getting the project priorities for next month figured out. Let's take this next 15 minutes and talk about that. Talk about like high level, like if we were to think about percentages and just kind of like what are the basic kind of like the most fundamental blocks of project. I'm not talking 20. I'm not even talking 8. I'm talking like 3. Maybe 3 projects that are big enough that 3, 4 that we're really trying to tackle in February. How would we describe those? And then on the Twitter workflows, either we may need to set that up as a separate conversation or just tackle that next Thursday. I'm sorry, guys. We ended up going long on the project discussion, but I think it was important to have. So let's try to tackle the projects thing. Let's turn it over. What are the big projects that we see everywhere?
So for February, the projects that I like with the Shelling Point Initiative, we're currently developing the roadmap for the first phase. We're breaking down this into 3 phases of the Shelling Point Initiative. The first phase is going to be the infrastructure and documentation. And so Joseph and I are currently working on the development of the roadmap, which we'll present next week after our call. And if anybody wants to help out with that, we're going to have the Shelling Point Initiative meeting right after Tuesday's meeting, our contributor meeting, and so that's going to be a big part of it. And so like this centers around both Twitter, our communications for the for the Shelling Point Initiative and the creation of research and interest groups, as well as like how to onboard new interest groups and research groups, and kind of getting the ball rolling with all of the ones that have applied to become a interest group. So this is all about like how do we get the documentation around and onboard, the interest group and research group leaders to follow the best practices, and making sure that we have a point where we can get these meetings rolling, because there has been interest in starting some of these groups, but we really do need to figure out the documentation aspect of it. So for the month of February, I think this is the big project for us within this phase, is just to make sure that we get the ball rolling. This is kind of the catalyst time period.
I think maybe we can call it common pool distribution in big terms. So that would have 2 parts. First is the voting system overall. So maybe not make a decision, right, but just have it more clear how to go about switching off conviction voting and some other details about that. And the other part would be grants. So hopefully maybe we have enough information either about the Gitcoin's grants platform or other thing, and we can have a decision about how we want to do grants, at least in the short term, and maybe even depending on which way we decide, maybe even start building the grants program. So I don't know if we make some more informal grants, small grants like the Algovera, maybe we start having a few documents on how that would look like in maybe start March, April, but that would depend on which way we want it. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I have one which is it's the TEA partnership, which is basically solidifying the plan. Yeah, so it's really about solidifying the plan in February. I mean, there are other, so I'm going to create another category that will be like a bin for holding things and see, let's throw things into that are strategic framework is one.
I think a lot of Bear's work in terms of continuing to iterate on the compensation model is something as well.
Also the accountability. Bear, what should we call the accountability stuff?
I'm calling them like review periods that should like incorporate all the accountability and all the feedback mechanisms.
Let's talk about curation service and how that's going to be changing, and then also comms, like what we're trying to do with comms.
Yeah.
What is happening with curation service status right now?
I think the curation service is a really important thing that for at least the Shelling Point initiative, and I have plans in a couple of months to really focus on the praise, curation service, and the proposal inverter. So like I do think that this is something that it's not a priority, but it does need to have somebody kind of continuing to making sure that the curation service progresses, because I'm relying on it to become a fundamental tool as an incentive for the research and interest group creations. So this is something that we really do need to keep afloat for the time being. It doesn't need to have significant progress, but we do need to make sure that it stays afloat.
And did you want to just give a quick update to folks on where?
Sure. Well, I don't remember how much we've said, but essentially, the Common Sense Makers guys had some sort of partnership with another group, and that partnership sort of fell off because the other group had some internal issues as well. And so right now, Shahar and all the Common Sense Makers guys are looking for options to, just to keep working, say funding, etc. We had what I thought it was a really nice conversation early this week or late last week with another group that provides small grants and is making some interest work. And seems like there could be some nice opportunities for the Common Sense Makers guys, and so we are kind of in the middle of that conversation and hoping to see it go well. And if it goes well, then I'm pretty sure that the creation service will be maintained long term. Right now, the bot is not working. I'm pretty sure, at least there's nothing new reflected on the Airtable, but and that's going to take a second, but that's supposedly going to be resolved anyways. And yeah, I don't know if I forgot something. You feel free to say something.
Yeah, I think that's basically it. I mean, I think the way that NT are looking at this is, the bot, the Stickflow bot, will probably get more usage, at least in the near term, over But we're hesitant to recommend that at this point until we know that these guys have a reliable developer source to be able to do bug fixes, emergency responses, like that. So that was what we asked them over the last couple of days. Is like, hey, what's your plan for having that kind of support? Because without that, we don't, like, for us, it's okay. And so that's what we're waiting to hear back on. I think there's kind of this general sense that's like, it's good enough right now functionally. We don't need a bunch of new features and things like that built. We can keep using it for Twitter, and for the Share It channel. Nate, there probably may need to be a few tweaks. I'm not sure, in order to do what you need it to do. But like, hopefully you can use it as is. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. I was also going to say that I just wanted to add that I think this, if we can make it into a practice, like this is a really important meeting. I think the last Thursday call of each month, if we can have this type of planning for the next month, and maybe solidify a roadmap. I intend to have a roadmap to present for the next Thursday call at the beginning of February to go over, and maybe even because I know that NT, you've been thinking a lot about the Gitcoin grant protocol and things like that. Perhaps having a kind of a development roadmap for that project for the month of February. We can both go over those two major projects that we have at the beginning, and therefore and allow other people to plug into those projects where they can. I do think this is a very, very important call to have, and a practice to have at the last Thursday call of each month. But yeah, do we prioritize the projects that we have listed here in terms of this month? Are we going to make it that way, or I'm not sure?
To be honest, we haven't quite figured out like the best way to think about. Okay, let's do this. To save time, what I'm going to ask is that you open up. This may be kind of crazy. Open up the chat in this group chat on this call. You all know how to do that, right? I'm going to just say, yeah, everybody knows how to do that. Here, I'm going to put a note there. So please just add an emoji to that if you know how to do this, if you know how to comment in there. 1, 2, I think that's everybody, right? Okay. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So here's what I'd like you to do. Just off the top of your, don't overthink it, but just give first reactions. Take these 3 things. Okay, what I'm going to do, let's see, hold on just a second. Okay, I don't know a better way of doing this, so we're just going to wing. Put in there, just say SPI, CPD. Okay, so CPD is Common Pool Distribution. SPI is the Shelling Point Initiative. And TP is the TEA partnership. Okay, so I'll model SPI. And then put the percentage that you think should be the actual budget for these. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. This is not scientific, but it will help us to kind of like hone in.
Yeah, and I guess it all depends for me, like, what exactly the work that is going to be done, like how much, with the common pool distribution, I would probably say allocate a lot more than what I proposed, based off of like how much can actually be done at the moment, because of, like, I don't know if we have access, like if we have access to the Gitcoin grant protocol, and if we can start actually doing work to develop that. I would say, yeah, let's put a lot of funding towards that for this particular month, because I do think that it's really important to get started on the development of that. And so, yeah, that is it's just kind of my justification is based off of, like, what is actually realistic in terms of what we can do, because if we can't do that, then there's not as much we can do except for foundational work to start preparing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It may be that what we do next time, and actually, we're not going to wait until the last week. We're going to start this off in probably the middle of the month. So, like for March, we'll probably start it in the. And maybe what we do is we kind of do like a strategic importance evaluation, and then get like what we can actually, like what we can do right now. That's a good point. Asa, does that rocket mean that you would prefer not to weigh in on this?
It just was a random emoji.
It was a what?
A random emoji that I sent.
Okay. But do you, okay, so Marathon Mind and Bear and Acid, do you have opinions on this you'd like to share?
They sent my budget proposal in the text. I don't know if you have seen.
Another text for
No,
where?
here in the chat is my percentage proposal.
Yeah. I only see the rocket emoji.
Yeah, I don't see it. I just see rocket.
What? Here it is.
Are you in the chat?
Oh, it says that okay, I will say it again. It the message doesn't send.
Okay. So
Here. Can you see it?
Nope.
No. Well, I said SPI 40, CPD 40, TP 10, and other 10, but I don't know why it doesn't like mention set.
Okay, let me just copy this and do you doing that, Nate? Yeah. Sounds
Yeah.
like it. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're running out of time, so I think this is a good first step. We'll take this, and then I think actually this would be good to get some feedback from the bigger crew on Tuesday, we're figuring this out. So I think this is a good first start. All right. Next week, believe it or not, we actually also need to start thinking about like our next funding proposal, which we'll probably need to get done by like the first week of March or so in order for us to not run out of funding. So that's another thing that goes into the other output. All right, everybody. Interesting call, actually. I appreciate everybody. I really do appreciate everybody's candid comments and engagement on this stuff. Very thoughtful. So,
Yeah, and I will say that with the CPD, if Inti, I assume that you're kind of owning this project. If there's any way I can plug it in, let me know. Maybe we can start having meetings on this project for the month of February to see how we can progress.
you're talking to NT, right?
Yeah, and likewise, if you're interested in helping out with the project for the SPI, let me know too.
All right, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for staying a couple minutes after. And yeah, we'll see you next week. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
See you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.